Structure of the plot. Plot elements. A story must have a beginning, a middle, and an end. A beginning is something that doesn't follow anything that caused it to happen. A middle has something that happens before it that leads to another thing that happens after it. And an end is something that naturally follows some other thing by necessity, but doesn't have anything following it. Anything beautiful should have its parts arranged in an orderly way that is significant or important to the whole thing. Beauty depends on order and significance, which is why something beautiful can't be too small to the eye, because you can't see the things that make it beautiful. Same with something too big, because you can't take it in all at once. A sense for the whole thing gets lost. It needs to be of a size which can be taken in and appreciated in its entirety, where you can take it in with one view of it. So a story can't be too long, as an audience needs to remember all of the things that happen in order to appreciate and follow it. The amount of time to tell the story should be dictated by the nature of the drama, and so long as it can be understood clearly and easily, then it can be as long as is necessary. A rough idea is that the length is determined by how long it takes to create change, from a good to a bad situation for the characters, or vice versa. If you're telling the story of Heracles, you don't include every single thing that he ever did. That would be overbearing. But only the things that are necessary and are appropriately connected to the story. When you put a story together, you shouldn't include things that don't make a difference to the story. If there are things that when removed from the story it becomes disjointed, then they have to be kept. Anything that, if it's there or not, doesn't make a visible difference is not an organic part of the story. And it's up to the writer to decide if it adds colour and is a good thing, or if it's extra fat that the script doesn't need. It's not the writer's job to say exactly what happened, if pulling from a true story, but what might happen according to what is likely or necessary. That's the difference between a historian and a writer. Therefore, writing is more philosophical than history. So writing is about the universal, whereas history is about the specific. The universal is how a certain type of person will likely or necessarily say or do in a given situation. And the universal element, otherwise known as a theme, is putting that expression into the characters. In tragedy, they like to stick to real names, because what is possible is credible. Whereas something we haven't seen is harder to feel possible. But if something insane happened, and we all know it happened, then that brings it into the realm of the possible. Sometimes in a tragedy, only a few people will be known, and the rest will be made up. And in others, all the characters might be made up. And they're all still pleasurable and fun, which means that we can reinvent stories so that they're relevant for the current audience, or create new stories as necessary. Even if a writer takes on a true story, they are still an artist, and it's up to the writer to decide how to dramatize those events based on the universal element that they are expressing. When plots or actions follow each other and don't have a probable or necessary link, that's the worst, because it breaks their natural flow. Stories aren't just about replicating an event, but should also induce fear or pity. And it's best produced when the results come from cause and effect, much more than if it happens by accident or coincidence. Unless that accident or coincidence is designed in a way that it seems to be more than just chaos. Reversal of the situation and recognitions. A plot where everything that came after is a result of what came before should have a reversal of the situation, or recognition, or both built into it. The reversal is where the situation flips on the character, still following what is probable or necessary. So, if everything was going well for the character, after the reversal, it's going to go bad, or vice versa. This happens because the previous actions change the character from ignorant to enlightened or knowledgeable, or producing love or hate between the characters, or whether they experience good or bad luck. All of these are choices for the writer. A recognition is when a character suddenly realizes or learns something that changes their perspective on their situation, or their character or other characters, or decisions that they've made. The best recognitions happen in the same moment as the reversal. The recognition between people is often the one most closely tied to the plot. Sometimes inanimate or trivial things can be an object of recognition, where they figure out what someone else has done or not. Sometimes one person makes the recognition. Sometimes it's all the characters that make that recognition. 1. The least artistic is the recognition of signs that are body parts which destine people to certain fates, like birthmarks or scars. They can also be acquired things like rings, necklaces, hats, whatever, which then help the characters discover something about them. They are convenient devices, which can be used to prove anything that the writer might need them to prove. 2. Characters announcing themselves, who they are and what they do. It projects the writer's desire to just introduce the character and might not be what the plot actually needs in that moment. It suffers the same problem as the first, because it requires no skill on the part of the writer. 3. An object or thing which, when the character sees it, evokes an emotional reaction in them based on a memory of it. Like hearing a song that their mother sang to them, or seeing a painting from their childhood. 4. A process of reasoning. A character can take something that they know about another character and infer or reason when given incomplete or vague information. Who is there and what is happening? That can then result in a wrong conclusion being drawn by those characters, which will lead to an expectation, which when applied is found out to be wrong, which results in a recognition that the expectation was miscalculated, or that the information leading to the expectation was false or misleading. 5 is when the recognition comes from the plot and the incidences between the characters. It's the most natural way for a recognition to occur, and it comes from the motivations and desires, i.e. thought, of the characters. These two parts of the plot, the reversal and recognition, rely upon surprises. When they're combined, they'll produce the feeling of fear or pity, because it's in that moment that we know that their fortune will change for the better or for the worse. So, a story should have a plot with a reversal and recognition, imitated actions which invoke pity and fear. Pity is created by unmerited misfortune. Fear is by misfortune of someone like us that we relate to. Therefore, a story shouldn't be a good person changing from a good situation into a bad one, as that's just depressing and, more importantly, doesn't invoke pity or fear. A villain who also has a huge downfall, while that might be morally satisfying, doesn't invoke pity or fear either. And in between those two extremes, there are characters who aren't necessarily a good person or a bad person, but whose misfortune isn't a result of the bad things that they did, but by some mistake or weakness of character. And then it's even better if that person is highly renowned or admired. A well-constructed plot should have a single theme running through it. For a tragedy, the change that happens should be from good to bad. It should happen due to some mistake or weakness, not from like a bad thing that they did. If these principles are followed, they're thought to be the most tragic in their effect, even if those stories end badly. Now, when the writer panders to what the audience really wants rather than what the story requires, it doesn't resonate in the same way. And even though those stories might be popular, they won't be considered a great story. Now, fear and pity can be created by using spectacle, but it's better if it's created from the inner structure of the plot. A really great story can be told without needing to be seen and will still give the audience all the feelings. But if you try and induce those feelings from spectacle, it requires help from outside of the story itself, which is the less artistic way to do it. Even if you use spectacle to show monstrous or terrible things, kind of misses the point of writing drama, because the fun of drama is experiencing the fear and pity through imitation, rather than something external. So here are the circumstances where pity and fear can be created. Now, they can happen between friends, enemies, or people who are indifferent to one another. If an enemy kills an enemy, nothing there brings out fear or pity in the action, or the intentions or thoughts of those characters. And the same goes for indifferent people. But if a friend kills a friend, a son their father, a mother their daughter, all those kinds of things, those are the scenarios that are ripe for drama. Now, 2. The actions can be taken by the characters knowing that they are about to hurt a friend. Or they might not know that they are friends and discover it afterwards. They might know that they are friends and then decide not to do it. Someone might not know the connection they have and discover it right before they do it. The worst way is to not know, find out, and then not act, because no disaster follows from that path of actions, which is why it's rarely used. Now, these are the only ways because the deed has to be done or not, and it has to happen knowingly or unknowingly. The plot should come to a conclusion naturally as a result of the plot itself. You don't want to use a deus ex machina, as that should only really be used to conclude things outside of the plot. Within the action, you don't want anything irrational, and if an irrational thing must be included, make sure that it isn't about the plot.